The HOA fined me for hunting, so I bought the land they used for hiking and closed it down permanently. It started with a smug HOA president handing me a $750 fine, threatening to have me arrested for trespassing on a piece of woods my family has hunted for generations. She stood there, on her precious community trail, lecturing me about safety and rules. But she had no idea I was about to uncover a secret buried in a 60-year-old property map. A secret proving the very land she stood on wasn't hers to begin with. What do you do when the people making the rules are the ones who are trespassing? Tell me where you're watching from in the comments, because you are not going to believe how this ends. It was 7 a.m. on a Saturday, the kind of quiet, misty morning in early fall that makes the woods feel like a cathedral. The sun wasn't fully up yet, just a pale white glow behind the thick pine trees that marked the edge of my property. I'd been up since 5, had my coffee, and was just walking out to my truck to grab my gear. The deer I'd tagged yesterday was hanging, and I had a long day of butchering ahead. It's hard work, but it's honest work. Puts good clean meat in the freezer for the winter, the same way my father and grandfather did on this very same land. That's when I saw it. A clean, white piece of paper, folded neatly under the driver's side windshield wiper of my old Ford F-150. It wasn't an advertisement. It was too crisp, too official looking for that. I pulled it out, the morning dampness making the paper feel cold and heavy in my hand. Typed in bold letters at the top were the words, Homeowners Association, Official Notice of Violation. Below that, a fine, $750. For a retired lineman, that's not pocket change. That's a real hit. The violation code was listed next. Unauthorized discharge of firearm on common grounds. I read it twice, just to make sure my eyes weren't playing tricks on me. I'm 68 years old. I've been hunting this patch of woods since I was a boy. This was the first time I'd ever been fined for putting meat in my freezer. I was calm, but a cold wire of anger started to hum deep in my chest. This wasn't just a fine. It was an accusation. It felt like someone had walked into my house and told me I was breathing wrong. As if on cue, a voice chirped from across the street. "Good morning, Ray." It was Marla Danning, the new HOA president. She'd moved in 2 years ago from some big city up north and immediately got herself voted into power. She was in her mid-50s, dressed in expensive-looking yoga pants and a fleece vest, holding a leash attached to a little dog that looked more like a dust mop with eyes. She had a tight, superior smile on her face, the kind that says, "I'm just doing my job, and my job is to make your life difficult." She didn't have to ask if I'd seen the notice. She knew. She'd probably put it there herself 5 minutes ago and had been watching from her window ever since. I held up the paper. "This is a joke, right, Marla?" Her smile didn't waver. "I'm afraid not, Ray." A concerned neighbor reported hearing a gunshot from the community greenbelt yesterday afternoon. "We have to take these things very seriously. Safety is our top priority." She said community greenbelt, like it was a sacred temple. To me, it was just the woods, the same woods I owned. Marla, I was on my own land. I have a 10-acre parcel that backs up to this subdivision. My property line is a good 200 yards past that trail you all use for your little hikes. I pointed toward the tree line. She shook her head, a practiced look of pity on her face. According to our official plat map, the hiking trail and the wooded area behind it are designated HOA common grounds. We have a clear policy against discharging firearms in those areas. "You crossed the boundary, Ray." I just stared at her. I'd owned this land since 1998. My wife Sarah and I bought it together before she passed. We walked those woods 1,000 times. I knew every rock and every creek bed. I'd paid for a professional survey when we bought it, and the iron stakes were still there if you knew where to look. I looked at Marla, with her smug face and her air of absolute certainty, and I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't about safety. This was about control. She saw an old man, a widower, living on his own, and figured he'd be an easy target to push around. She then leaned in a little, her voice dropping to a confidential, threatening tone. "Look, Ray, just pay the fine. We can consider this a warning, but if it happens again, we'll have no choice but to escalate. That means involving law enforcement. We can't have residents feeling unsafe because of activities like yours." She made hunting sound like a criminal enterprise. I folded the notice and put it in my pocket. I didn't say another word to her. I just turned around and walked back into my house, the screen door slapping shut behind me. She could stand there all day for all I cared. My mind was already churning. Inside, I went straight to the old roll-top desk in my study. I pulled out a long, cardboard tube. It was dusty. I hadn't looked at these papers in years. I carefully unrolled the original plat map from the 1998 survey. The lines were crisp, the surveyor's seal clear and official. Then I pulled out my property deed. I smoothed both documents out on the kitchen table, side by side. I traced the boundaries with my finger, the same boundaries I'd walked my whole life. There was my 10 acres, clear as day. And there, just as I remembered, was the section of woods where the HOA had put in their little hiking trail a few years back. The paper was old, the ink slightly faded, but the lines were undeniable. They showed exactly what I knew to be true. I stared at it for a long, long time. Marla said they had an official plat map, but I was holding the real one right here. So what map was she looking at? A thought, cold and clear, began to form in my mind. Something was deeply wrong here. They weren't just mistaken, they were lying. I picked up a red pen, and with a steady hand, I circled the entire wooded parcel where they'd built their precious trail. I leaned over the map, the full weight of her threat, the condescending smile, the bogus fine settling on my shoulders. Then I whispered it out loud, to the empty kitchen, a promise to myself and to the memory of my wife. That ain't their land. The next day was Sunday. The quiet didn't last long. Around 11:30 in the morning, I was in my garage, sharpening a chainsaw chain. It's a methodical process that clears my head. The sound of car doors slamming more than one made me look up. Striding up my driveway was a small platoon. Marla Danning was in the lead, clipboard in hand, looking like a general reviewing the troops. Flanking her was a man I recognized as Dale Spenner, a retired mall cop, who now acted as the HOA's self-appointed security liaison. He was wearing a vest with reflective stripes and had a look of profound seriousness on his face. Two other board members, a nervous-looking man and a woman who refused to make eye contact, trailed behind them like pilot fish. They didn't knock. They didn't call ahead. They just marched right onto my property, as if they owned it. Marla stopped at the edge of my open garage door. "Mr. McKinney," she announced, her voice echoing slightly in the concrete space. "We're conducting a routine safety walkthrough of the neighborhood properties. As you know, our bylaws permit board access for compliance checks. I knew no such thing. My deed didn't say anything about surprise inspections from a neighborhood committee." I slowly put down my file and wiped my hands on a rag, letting the silence stretch. "You're on my property, Marla. Uninvited." Dale puffed out his chest. "It's an official HOA action, sir." He said, "Sir," like he was a cop in a bad TV show. I saw his eyes scan my workbench, lingering on a box of shotgun shells I had sitting out for dove season. His hand twitched, as if he wished he had a notepad to write a ticket. I didn't argue. I just reached into my pocket, pulled out my smartphone, and hit the record button. I held it up, steady and obvious. "For my records," I said, my voice as calm as I could make it. The dynamic shifted instantly. The nervous man looked at the ground. Dale's tough guy act faltered for a second. Marla's smile tightened. "If you must," she said. And then she began her inspection. It was a joke. They pointed at a piece of siding near the roofline, that had a small, hairline crack from a hailstorm years ago. Structural integrity concern, Marla dictated to the woman with the pen. They walked over to my woodpile. Improperly stacked. Potential rodent harborage. Then Dale, the security expert, pointed a trembling finger toward the corner of my yard. "What is that?" he demanded. I followed his gaze. He was pointing at my bird feeder. A big, wooden feeder that my wife and I had built together. It was buzzing with activity finches, cardinals, a couple of aggressive blue jays squabbling over sunflower seeds. "It's a bird feeder, Dale," I said flatly. He shook his head grimly. "It's attracting vermin and causing territorial disputes. It's a hostile environment. A hostile bird feeder." I almost laughed. They were making up violations on the spot, building a case out of thin air because I wouldn't be pushed around. As they finished their lap and headed back toward the driveway, Marla thought I was out of earshot. I heard her mutter to Dale, quiet but clear, "He's not the kind of neighbor we want here." The phone in my hand caught it all. They left, and an hour later I had an email with a list of my new violations, complete with a 15-day deadline to comply. That evening, I drafted a formal complaint. I cited the HOA's own rules about respecting homeowner privacy and the requirement for 48-hour written notice for any property inspection unless it was a life-threatening emergency. A hostile bird feeder didn't quite meet that standard. I attached a screenshot from my property deed and the relevant county statutes about trespassing. I sent it to the entire board. I expected a debate, maybe an apology. What I got was nothing. Silence. They didn't even bother to acknowledge they'd received it. That's when I knew this wasn't just a power trip. This was something else. They were acting like they had an authority they shouldn't have. An authority that went beyond picking on my siding. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about her words. According to our official plat map. Where did she get that map? I went online to the HOA's sad little website, a page that looked like it hadn't been updated in years. Tucked away in a community documents section, I found it. A PDF file titled Oak Ridge Estates Official Plat Map 2017. I downloaded it and opened it on my computer screen. At first glance, it looked almost identical to my old survey map from 1988. The property lines for the houses were the same. The streets were the same. But my eyes went straight to the back of the subdivision, to my 10 acres. On their map, the boundary line was different. It was subtle, just a slight shift, but it cut off a huge slice of my property, the entire wooded area where I hunted. And in that section, in neat, official-looking letters, were the words, HOA, Common Area, Preserved Greenbelt. My heart started to beat a little faster. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a misunderstanding. The survey lines had been deliberately redrawn. They had created a forged document and were using it as a weapon against me. I pulled up my original map file next to theirs. The difference was glaring once you knew where to look. They hadn't just made a claim. They had created fake proof to back it up. I leaned back in my chair, the glow of the monitor lighting up my dark study. The whole picture was snapping into focus. The fine, the trespassing, the bogus violations, it was all built on a foundation of lies. A cold, hard certainty settled over me. This was no longer just about a fine or a hunting spot. This was about the truth. I looked at the two maps, the real one and the fake one, and a new question formed in my mind. A question that would change everything. They think I hunt in their woods. But what if they're hiking in mine? Having a forged map was one thing. Proving it was another. Arguing with Marla Danning was like trying to teach a pig to sing. It wasted my time and annoyed the pig. I needed facts. Cold, hard, undeniable facts that a county clerk would understand. I had my old paper survey, but in today's world, I needed more. I needed a digital hammer. That's when I thought of Carlos. My niece, Sarah, married a good man, a GIS technician for a nearby city. Carlos Ramirez is one of those guys who just loves puzzles. He sees the world in layers of data. More importantly, he hates bullies and people who abuse the system. I called him that Tuesday evening. I didn't even have to finish explaining the situation. The moment I said, HOA is using a fake map, I heard him say, "Uncle Ray, I'm on my way. Don't do anything until I get there. This is going to be fun." He showed up the next day after work with a laptop and a big case that held his drone. He's a cheerful guy, about 38, and he has a respect for old-timers like me that you don't see much anymore. We sat at my kitchen table, and I laid out my 1998 survey next to a printout of the HOA's version. He took one look and whistled. "Wow, that's not a mistake. That's a forgery. A bad one, too. The line weight is wrong, and the font for the common area text doesn't match the rest of the original plat. Amateurs." He fired up his laptop and connected to the county's online GIS portal. He explained it in simple terms. Think of this as the official digital map of the whole county, Uncle Ray. Every piece of property is a shape, and every shape has data attached to it. Owner, address, tax info, zoning. It's all public record. You just have to know where to click. He typed in my address. In seconds, my property appeared on the screen. A clear, sharp outline in blue. Then he clicked a button to overlay the official property tax parcel map. My 10 acres were perfectly defined, exactly as shown on my old survey. There was no HOA common area cutting into it. That was proof number one. "Okay," Carlos said, leaning in. "So their map is bogus. Now for the fun part. Who actually owns the land their trail is on?" He clicked on the parcel of land next to mine, the wooded area in question. The property information popped up in a box. It wasn't owned by the HOA. The owner was listed as an LLC, Oak Ridge Developers, LLC. My heart skipped a beat. That was the name of the original builder who put up the subdivision 30 years ago. Carlos's fingers flew across the keyboard. "Let's look up that LLC." He navigated to the state's business registry. We found it in less a minute. Oak Ridge Developers, LLC. Charter dissolved in 2003. They went out of business. So the HOA was using land owned by a company that hadn't existed for nearly 20 years. They had just claimed it, like squatters with a clipboard. But then came the twist. As we looked at the property tax records for that supposedly abandoned parcel, Carlos went quiet. He just pointed at the screen. Under Taxpayer of Record, it listed another LLC, one I knew very well. And next to it, the date the ownership was transferred, 2006. I just stared at the screen, and then I started to laugh. A deep, long laugh that came from a place of pure, unexpected satisfaction, because I had forgotten one small detail. Back in 2006, a few years after the builder went under, that piece of woodland came up for sale in a county tax auction. It was listed for pennies on the dollar because nobody wanted an undeveloped, landlocked parcel of woods. Sarah was still with me then, and we decided to buy it. We thought of it as a buffer, a way to make sure no one could ever build right up against our property line. We put it in a simple LLC for liability, paid the back taxes, and then, for 15 years, we just paid the small property tax bill every year and never thought about it again. It was just the woods. The very same woods Marla and her hiking club were calling their private park. She had absolutely no idea. She'd find me for hunting on my own land and then trespassed onto another piece of my land to do it. The sheer arrogance of it was breathtaking. Carlos just shook his head, a huge grin on his face. "Uncle Ray, this is better than Christmas." We now had an ironclad case. We had the original 1998 plat. We had the official county GIS data confirming my boundaries. We had the property tax logs, showing I had been paying the taxes on that so-called greenbelt since 2006. And for the final nail in the coffin, Carlos took his drone up He flew the exact property line. The camera pointed straight down, recording high-definition, time-stamped video with GPS coordinates burned into the corner of the screen. We even found 2 of the original iron survey stakes, half buried in leaves and dirt, exactly where they were supposed to be. It was undeniable. It was a checkmate. That Friday, I didn't send an email to the HOA. I didn't make a phone call. I drove down to the county clerk's office with a folder containing printouts of everything we'd found. I filed the paperwork to have the land reposted. Under my own LLC's name, I applied for a permit to erect a permanent fence along the property line that bordered the subdivision. No trespassing. Private property. Hunting in progress. The gears of true official power were now turning in my favor. And Marla had no idea what was coming. The week I spent waiting for the fencing permit felt longer than a winter. Every morning, I expected to see Marla or her mall cop Dale marching up my driveway with another bogus notice. But there was nothing, just an unnerving silence. I knew it was the quiet before the storm. On Friday afternoon, the permit came through from the county. I didn't waste a minute. I spent the rest of the day and into the evening driving steel T-posts into the ground along the exact property line Carlos and I had marked. It was hard work, my back and shoulders aching, but every post I drove felt like a small victory. On each one, I fastened a brand new, professionally printed sign. The letters were big, red, and impossible to miss. Private property, no trespassing. And on the main sign, right at the entrance to their beloved trail, I added a little something extra. Hunting in progress. Violators will be prosecuted. It was all perfectly legal and officially sanctioned by the county. I finished just as the last bit of light faded from the sky. The next morning, Saturday, I was up before dawn. I put on a pot of coffee, got dressed in my blaze orange hunting vest and cap, and sat in my kitchen where I had a clear view of the trailhead. I wasn't actually hunting, but I wanted to look the part. Around 9 o'clock, they arrived, right on schedule. It was Marla's Saturday morning hiking club. A group of about 6 of them, all dressed in matching athletic wear, chattering away as they approached the path. Then they saw the first sign. They stopped dead. The chatter died. I saw Marla walk right up to the main sign, her hands on her hips, reading it over and over as if the words might change. Dale was with her, of course, looking confused and impotent without a violation to write. This was my cue. I picked up my empty rifle case just for effect and walked calmly out of my house and down the driveway. I stopped about 20 feet from them, on my side of the new property line. Marla's head snapped toward me, her face a mask of pure rage. "What is the meaning of this, Ray?" she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at the sign. "You can't do this! This is a community amenity!" I took a slow sip of coffee from my thermos. "Morning, Marla. Nice day for a walk. Just not here." Her face went from red to purple. "This isn't legal. We have a map. This is HOA common ground." I just shook my head, keeping my voice low and steady. It's a trick I learned in the service. The louder they get, the quieter you get. It drives them crazy. "Marla," I said, as if explaining something to a child, "you can't vote against gravity. And you can't hike on land you don't own." I paused to let that sink in. This land has been privately owned by a registered LLC since 2006. It's never belonged to the HOA. You and your friends are trespassing. I'd advise you to leave. Dale stepped forward, trying to regain some authority. "We'll have you cited for this. This is interference with community." He trailed off because he didn't know what to call it. I looked right past him, back to Marla. "Check the county records. It's all public. Then you can send my LLC an apology for the illegal fine you tried to levy against me." Her eyes were narrowed to slits. She knew she was caught, but she couldn't admit it. Instead of retreating, she doubled down. She pulled a fresh violation notice from her ever-present clipboard and started writing furiously. "Fine," she spat. "You want to play games? Here's a new fine. $1,200 for interference with community amenities and erecting an unauthorized barrier. She strode over and tried to shove it into my hand. I didn't take it. I just let it fall to the ground. Then I looked her right in the eye. That's harassment, Marla. And that, I can do something about. On Monday morning I took a drive. Not to a lawyer, but straight to the county administration building. I filed a formal harassment complaint against the HOA, specifically naming Marla Danning. I attached copies of everything. The first bogus fine, the video of their illegal inspection, the second fine, for $200, and printouts of the official county plat map, and my LLC's deed to the property. The clerk I spoke to, a woman who looked like she'd seen it all, slowly read through my paperwork, her expression growing more and more grim. She made a few calls. 2 days later, I got a call from her office. The county had sent a cease and desist letter to the HOA. They were ordered to withdraw the fines immediately and to have no further contact with me regarding property I legally owned. It was a clean, official win. But the real proof, the final, undeniable receipt, came from an unexpected place. An email landed in my inbox a day later from an anonymous address. The subject line just said, "Thought you should see this." Inside was a forwarded email chain from 3 weeks ago, before any of this had truly started. It was between Marla and 2 other board members. One of them, the nervous man from the inspection, had questioned the boundary line, writing, "Are we sure about this? His old survey might be the right one." Marla's reply was the smoking gun. "It doesn't matter if it's the right one," she wrote. "It's the one we use. He is not the kind of person we want in this community. And we need control of that wooded area. Just keep the pressure on. He's an old man. He'll fold." I printed out the emails and placed them on top of the growing stack of evidence on my kitchen table. This wasn't just an overreach anymore. It wasn't a mistake. It was a conspiracy. And they had just handed me all the ammunition I would ever need. That leaked email was like a crack in a dam. The person who sent it to me clearly sent it to others as well, because the mood in the neighborhood changed overnight. People had been hearing Marla's side of the story, that some cranky old hunter was being difficult and unsafe. But now they had proof that she knew the land wasn't hers, and went after me anyway. The whispers started. Neighbors who used to wave, now just gave a tight-lipped nod. The community amenity they thought they'd lost was revealed to be land they'd never been entitled to in the first place. Marla had lied to them, and people don't like being lied to, especially when it makes them look like fools. The HOA board, which had seemed like a solid wall behind her, started to crumble. The first to go was the nervous-looking man, the one who had questioned her in the email. He resigned quietly, citing personal reasons. A week later, another board member, the woman who had taken notes during the fake inspection, also stepped down. They didn't want to be associated with the fallout. Marla was losing her army. She was an empress with no clothes, and everyone was starting to see it. One evening my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number, but I answered anyway. The voice on the other end was calm and familiar. "Ray, it's Don McCleary." Don was the county sheriff, a former Marine I'd known for 30 years. We'd hunted these same hills together, long before any HOA existed. "I heard about the trouble you're having," he said, his voice laced with a dry humor. "Sounds like you've got a little border dispute." I told him the whole story, from the first fine to the leaked emails. He was quiet for a long moment when I finished. "Listen to me, Ray," he said, and his voice was all business now. "You're in the right. The county backs your property. Claim 100%. Marla Danning and her security liaison have zero law enforcement authority. They are civilians, period. If they or anyone from that HOA ever sets foot on your land again, you don't call the HOA office. You call me. Direct. On my personal cell." That phone call was better than any legal document. It was the law itself, telling me I had nothing to fear. Marla, however, wasn't the type to give up. Losing her public support just made her angrier. She couldn't use the HOA to find me anymore, so she tried to use the city and county instead. A complaint was filed with city code enforcement about my cracked siding and improperly stacked firewood. An inspector came out, a young guy who looked apologetic. He walked the property with me, looked at the hairline crack in the neat wood pile, and shook his head. "Sir, this is the most ridiculous complaint I've seen all year. Everything is perfectly fine. Have a good day." He closed the case on the spot. Next, a complaint was filed with the county about unsafe firearm discharge, rehashing the original lie. Sheriff McCleary himself handled it. He called me to let me know the complaint was received and immediately dismissed as unfounded and likely malicious. Every attempt she made to harass me backfired, making her look more and more desperate and unhinged. During all this, I realized that other people might be in the same boat, getting bullied by HOAs who bend the truth. I spent a weekend putting my evidence together in a clear, step-by-step way. I wanted to show people exactly how I proved my case. I scanned my 1998 deed and survey. I took screenshots of the county's GIS map, showing the true property lines. I included the tax records for my LLC. And I explained how Carlos's drone footage, with its GPS data and timestamps, became irrefutable proof of the original survey markers. I made copies, just in case any of my neighbors needed to see what real documentation looked like. Not all my neighbors were against me. A few, like my old Vietnam buddy Frank, who lived 2 doors down, stopped by to shake my hand. "Give 'em hell, Ray," he'd said with a grin. I told him and a couple other trusted friends that they were welcome to walk the trails on my land any time, so long as they let me know they were coming. The land wasn't closed to everyone, just to the people who tried to steal it. The final, spectacular implosion happened 2 weeks later. It was late afternoon, the prime time for deer to start moving. I was sitting quietly in a deer stand I'd built years ago, deep in my own woods, just watching the trees. It was peaceful. Then, I heard a loud snapping of twigs. It wasn't a deer. I saw a flash of a pink fleece vest through the trees. It was Marla. She was back on my property, well past the no trespassing signs, stomping through the underbrush like she was looking for a fight. She had a pair of bolt cutters in her hand. My blood went cold. She was there to destroy my property. But what she didn't know was that my call with Sheriff McCleary wasn't just a friendly chat. He had told me what to do. I stayed perfectly still, pulled out my phone, and hit the speed dial for his personal number. I didn't speak. I just held the phone up so the microphone could pick up the sound of her crashing through the woods. Within 10 minutes, I heard the faint sound of a vehicle approaching on the gravel road behind the subdivision. 2 of Don's deputies came walking quietly down the trail. They caught her red-handed, bolt cutters raised, about to cut the chain on a small gate I had installed. I watched from my stand as they calmly explained that she was under arrest for criminal trespass and for disturbing a lawful hunt, which is a serious offense in our state. Her face was a picture of pure disbelief as they put her hands behind her back. The satisfying click of handcuffs echoed through the quiet evening woods. Marla's arrest for trespassing sent a shockwave through the neighborhood. But it was just the beginning of the official reckoning. About 8 weeks after this whole mess started, we all had to appear at a county hearing. It wasn't a criminal trial, but a formal review requested by what was left of the HOA board, who were desperately trying to prove their map had some legitimacy. They came with a lawyer who talked in circles about bylaws and community standards. I didn't bring a lawyer. I just brought my folder. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't make a speech. I just walked the hearing officer through the documents, one by one. Here is my original, notarized survey from 1998. Here is my official property deed. Here are the county tax records showing my LLC has owned and paid taxes on the disputed land since 2006. And here is the county's own official GIS map, which confirms all of it. I laid them out in a neat row. The HOA's lawyer held up their forged PDF printout. The officer, a no-nonsense woman with tired eyes, looked at their map, then at my stack of official county documents. She didn't even have to deliberate. She looked at the HOA's representatives and said, "The county's records are clear. This land belongs to Mr. McKinney's LLC. The HOA has no authority, jurisdiction, or claim over this parcel. Your map is not a legal document. This matter is closed." The gavel came down with a flat, final thud. Vindicated. That's a good word for how I felt, but I wasn't done. Being right wasn't enough. They had put me through weeks of stress. They'd tried to brand me as a criminal on my own land. They had harassed me and tried to intimidate me with bogus fines. So I went on the offensive. I filed a civil suit against the HOA for the full amount of their false fines, plus damages for harassment and emotional distress. I wasn't trying to get rich. I was trying to get justice. I wanted to make it hurt enough that they would never, ever pull a stunt like this on anyone else again. They knew they couldn't win. Their own lawyer told them that my evidence was ironclad. They settled out of court. A check for $8,000 arrived in my mailbox a week later, signed by the HOA's treasurer. The first thing I did with that money was turn their malice into my security. I hired a local company to install a heavy-duty, galvanized steel gate at the trailhead. It wasn't something bolt cutters could defeat, and all along the fence line, I had motion-activated, night vision cameras installed. They fed directly to my phone. If a squirrel so much as blinked on my property line, I would know it. It brought me a peace of mind that I hadn't had in months. Several neighbors asked me how I did it, how I fought back and won so decisively. So I started explaining my method, showing them the proof and the process. I told them it was a simple, three-part system. First, you gather your foundation, your original property deed, and the survey map you got when you bought your house. These are your undeniable truths. Second, you verify those truths with the authorities. Go to your county's GIS website. It's a public tool. You can see the official map of your property, who owns it, and who pays taxes on it, right there in black and white. It's the same data the tax assessor uses. If the HOA's map doesn't match the county's map, the HOA's map is worthless. Third, if there's any doubt, you force a review. You take all your documents down to the county clerk or recorder's office and file a formal request for title verification. They have to investigate. You use the system's own rules to protect yourself. The final chapter of Marla's reign came at the next monthly HOA meeting. The room was packed. Word had gotten out. She stood at the front, looking small and pale without her clipboard and her enforcer Dale, who had resigned right after her arrest. She read from a prepared statement, her voice thin and wavering. "Due to some incorrect assumptions on my part regarding property boundaries," she began, "I made some decisions that have caused confusion in the community. For that, I apologize. Effective immediately, I am resigning my position as president and as a member of the board." It was a weak, self-serving apology. She wasn't sorry for what she did. She was sorry she got caught. No one clapped. No one said a word. She just gathered her papers and walked out of the room to dead silence. As a final measure, the county informed the HOA that from now on, any land-based violation they issued had to be submitted to the county for pre-approval with a corresponding official plat map. They had lost their power to invent fines out of thin air. It was truly over, or so I thought. About a month later, my phone buzzed late at night. It was an alert from one of my new cameras. I opened the video feed. A figure, dressed in dark clothes, was creeping along my fence line. They were holding a pair of heavy bolt cutters. Even in the grainy night vision, the face was unmistakable. It was Marla. She hadn't learned a single thing. I didn't hesitate. I dialed 911 this time. patched the live video feed directly to the dispatcher, and watched as 2 patrol cars rolled up with their lights off. The dispatcher stayed on the line with me, and I heard the whole thing through the phone of the responding officer. I heard him walk up behind her. I heard her gasp of surprise. And then I heard his voice, calm, professional, and utterly final. "Please turn around, ma'am. 3 months have passed since Marla's second arrest. The woods are quiet again. It's a different kind of quiet now. A deeper, more settled peace. My new gate stands not as a symbol of a fight, but as a marker of a settled fact. The motion-activated cameras are my silent sentinels, and the only alerts I get now are from deer wandering through at dawn, or a family of raccoons making their nightly row. The steel T-posts and the bright red signs have become a part of the landscape, a clear and permanent declaration of the truth. It's my land. It always was." Marla's final chapter was as pathetic as her leadership. After her second arrest, caught on crystal-clear video with bolt cutters in hand, there was no escaping the consequences. She took a plea deal. She got probation, a hefty fine for criminal mischief, and a court-ordered restraining order that forbids her from coming within 500 feet of me or my property line. The public humiliation was the real punishment. Within a month, a for sale sign went up in her yard. I watched from my window as the moving truck pulled away, taking with it the last trace of the petty tyranny that had tried to take root here. She was gone. The storm had passed. But the story didn't feel finished. Winning for myself was one thing, but I kept thinking about all the other folks out there, maybe not as stubborn or as lucky as me, getting pushed around by bullies with clipboards. I thought about what a difference it would have made if I'd had a simple guide to follow from day one. So, with Carlos's help, I used some of the settlement money to build something. We launched a website. It's a simple, no-frills site called huntyourrights.com. There are no ads, no sign-ups. It's just a free resource for any homeowner who finds themselves in a similar fight. I wrote it all out in plain language a fifth grader could understand. No lawyer speak. I created a section called How to Prove It with a step-by-step guide. Step 1. Find your original deed and survey. Step 2. Go to your county GIS website and compare the official map to yours. I included links to the GIS portals for every state. Step 3. I uploaded template letters, a polite but firm letter, to dispute a false fine, a formal notice of trespassing for HOA board members, and a request for title verification to send to your county clerk. Carlos even made a short, clear video tutorial showing exactly how to use a GIS map to find your true property lines in under 5 minutes. The goal was to give people the tools I had to build for myself. It was about taking away the power of intimidation and replacing it with the power of facts. The response was bigger than I ever could have imagined. I started getting emails from people all over the country, a rancher in Montana dealing with a new subdivision, a family in Florida with an HOA trying to claim their lakefront, an old woman in Ontario whose board was fining her for planting a vegetable garden. They used the templates, followed the steps, and started winning. The impact here at home was more direct. The HOA, now under new, much humbler leadership, worked with the county to rewrite some of their core policies. There's a new rule now, one that the old-timers have started calling Ray's Law. Before the HOA can issue any fine related to a property line, a fence, or land use, they are now required by their own bylaws to perform a land title check with the county and attach the official GIS parcel map to the violation notice. They can never again weaponize a fake map. The system that enabled Marla's abuse was dismantled. I never wanted to be a hero. I just wanted to be left alone. But in a quiet way, I became something of a local legend. People I barely knew would stop me at the hardware store to shake my hand. They saw me as the guy who stood up to a bully and won. Not with threats or anger, but with a surveyor's map and the truth. They came after me with a clipboard. I answered with a deed, a drone, and the truth. Today, the air is crisp, and the autumn leaves are starting to turn. I'm sitting up in my old deer stand, the one where I watched the final act of Marla's little drama play out. I'm not hunting. I'm just here, sipping coffee from a thermos, watching the sun filter through the canopy of the woods. My woods. There's a quiet satisfaction in this. It's the feeling of order restored, of a world set right. My gaze falls on an old, weathered piece of wood I nailed to a big oak tree near the stand years ago, something my grandfather used to say all the time. The letters are faded but still clear in the morning light. It says, "You don't own what you didn't buy."